Hey everybody, this is Jonathan Schwartz. Welcome to the WonderKind podcast. Today's episode is a very special one. It's with someone I've gotten to know very intimately through a process that brings up a roller coaster of emotions, trying to find a home in New York City. Ben Stratt is a real estate agent with Keller Williams, working in arguably the toughest market in the country, not just for buyers, not just for sellers, but for brokers too. If you can make it here, as the saying goes, you've probably refreshed Zillow and Street Easy at 2 a.m. until you get carpal tunnel, and you've forgotten which apartment had the slanted floors versus the one with the karaoke bar underneath. You've been blindsided by a massive construction site next door, discovered the co-op board application is 117 pages long, paid $350 just to access building financials, and wondered whether you should charge the rats since they seem to have signed a lease before you did. What makes Ben stand out in all of that chaos is his calm, his care, his trustworthiness. He has the gift for making people feel seen and steady, even when the stakes are really high and the details are murky. Before stepping into real estate, Ben was a middle school teacher. He still brings a teacher's patience, empathy, and a gift for simplifying complex topics into every client interaction. He's one of those people who just wants you to understand what's going on and feel good about the choices you're making. What I personally appreciated most when I worked with Ben, beyond his deep knowledge of the market, was how much he checked in, followed up, and genuinely made sure I felt supported the entire way. That kind of care is rare, and it's why I'm really excited to sit down with him for this conversation. This episode is about real estate, but more than that, it's about how to build real relationships, stay human, and keep showing up. Ben, welcome to WonderKind.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for the introduction. I'm not sure if I need you to put that whole thing on a review for me or if I should just copy and paste that as my bio. But amazingly kind words and appreciate it. And we had a great time working together. So I'm excited to do this with you and be able to work with you in a new capacity.
Yeah, it's fantastic, Ben. You can copy paste. I can put it on Zillow whatever format you need. All of it is true, and you basically you shocked me and dispelled a lot of the notions of what I thought a New York City realtor would be like. So before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of what your job is like and what you've learned from real estate, what, if anything, do you still use in terms of those teaching practices? What from the classroom have you brought into the real estate industry?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, it's just the mindset of educating people. I enjoy that. It's tough because you're educating adults now, and not every adult wants to be educated. A lot of people think they know that they have all the information already, and so you have to mask it a little bit, which I think I'm still working on because I used to be, just straightforward. I'm here to teach you versus I want to teach you, but I don't want you to think that I'm just telling you how it is. And some people lean into it and love it, but other people, they're potentially more intelligent people than I am. So, they have higher paying jobs than I have. And so they don't want to just be told how things are or how things work, which, obviously that's not how I approach it. But yeah, it's really working in that education piece without just pounding people with information. You're not prepping them for a test.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because it's also like students have different outcomes or goals. And we talked about this when we were going through our process, that sometimes you'll meet very intelligent people who have super high paying jobs who are maybe nickel and diming over $10,000, $20,000 on a multi-million-dollar property, and you are trying to gently nudge them in the direction of happiness, or maybe that place is something is an incredible location. How do you kind of navigate, let's say, coaching up or trying to teach someone who is an adult and may make a lot of money, but may in that moment bring emotion or something else into this interaction?
That's where, and you, as a teacher, you're always learning from your students, but this is a different level. You really have to learn about who your client is and what they want from this. And we had that conversation when we started, and I said, let me know, are you the type of person that wants to get every nickel and dime dollar out of this deal and get to the absolute bottom line on every offer we make? Or do you want to find the right home for you and not miss out on the right opportunity? And you were very clear about it. You wanted happiness. And I said, if that happiness costs you an extra $20,000 so that you don't miss out on a property, that I'll that's what we're going to do. Yes, it's my job to find you, to get you the best price, but time and time again, when you squeeze out that last dollar, it always leaves the door open for somebody else, and you don't want to be left out to dry and without the property or home that you want to live in over a number that once you sign that paper and once you move in, you'll never think about that $10,000 again ever if you're happy. If you're not happy and you made the wrong choice somehow, that's a different story, but that would have happened regardless.
Right. You'll never think about that $10,000. And something you also taught me is you'll never think about that other real estate broker who might have been an asshole or brought bad energy. You're moving into the place. You're not moving in with the many parties involved in this process.
Yeah, but it's so, I always tell people when there's different agents involved, different people involved, when someone walks into a space that they're potentially going to buy, there's the most important thing for me, if they're not an investor, is that has to feel like a home to them. There has to be a level of comfort. And if your agent or the seller's agent or vice versa, whatever side you're on, if they make things awkward for any reason, you feel that awkwardness, that uncomfortability, and then you're walking out of there, you may have loved the place. It may have been everything you wanted, but there's just something you walked out of there, like, it didn't feel right. And sometimes that's my job to say, hey, that other agent, he was the problem, she was the problem, they were the problem. This space is right for you, I think. Take them out of the equation and then think about how you feel. Sometimes you can't do that. And that's life. That's what people are part of this process.
Yeah. Well, the process is very foreign. As a first-time buyer myself, I didn't understand the kind of hurry up and wait of this life cycle. There's many times when you need to just jam things home and, you and I are on the phone late at night, got to text things. And then there's periods where we're just chilling. So understanding the life cycle of real estate is very difficult to navigate for new people. And I think for you, one of the things I appreciate about you is really contextualizing our relationship and understanding what my needs are from the get-go. The example was we went on a few tours and we didn't like anything, but we honed in on a neighborhood we really wanted to be around. And you told me, hey, we've been on 5 tours today. This is a win, even though you didn't come out with that place you're going to put a down payment on, which was an eye-opening experience for me. So maybe walk me through what it's like to build that relationship from scratch when people don't really expect milestones to be exactly as non-linear as they are.
Well, first of all, you're like my poster child for what I wish every buyer could be. And I'm not blowing smoke here. When we first had our conversation, you had appointments before we even met or spoke, and you canceled those because you felt a connection with me. That is numero uno when I'm working with a buyer. People often don't trust the New York City real estate agents, and for good reason in many cases. But it's very tough for us to trust buyers. One thing that many people preach in this business, the saying is on our side, buyers are liars. And it's not pretty, it's ugly, but it's true. You can't trust people until you can trust people, right? And we built that trust early, and that allowed me to be as honest as I possibly could when something wasn't right for you, even when I thought, Jonathan kind of likes this a little bit, but, I felt the need, no, we're going to point out this. I don't think this is right for you. There are problems here that I see. Not every agent's going to do that, but certainly almost no agent's going to do that if they don't trust their buyer. Because if you think this is going to be the only property you see with me, my only opportunity to do a deal is this property. And now that changes our whole role, our outlook on things, and how we're going to help you, and in some cases, how we're not going to help you.
Wow, I never heard buyers are liars. And that's crazy, funny, right? From the buyer's perspective. We would think brokers are liars, and there's so much puffery and even in social media or reality shows, the staging of apartments in its own way is kind of dressing things up. So being able to build trust seems like it's a very important part of this puzzle, and not a lot of people are finding the corner piece here.
It's the most important part, period. And from your side of things, the buyers, are New York City brokers, tough? Can they be shady? All the cliches. They can be all those things. And some people are going to be that way no matter what. So it's your job as a buyer to feel us out, because we're not all created equal, but also on the buy side, we're also doing the same thing. We're trying to feel you out. Can I trust this person? Are they going to stick with me? All of that stuff. And it's a real dance and balancing act and just people interacting, which is everything. But in this business, even more so because so much is at stake.
Yeah. Well, I mean, trust is the most important, and it seems like, are a lot of bad actors in the industry. I want to talk a little bit about New York City specifically and the changes that have happened in 2025. We have the NAR lawsuit, we have the FAIR Act. You dumped about 45 minutes of information on me when I was first looking to move that was frankly quite overwhelming even to you, and it was new to people in the industry. So do you think we're moving in the right direction to help that level of trust across the industry, or what's your take on how we can navigate the regulatory landscape in New York City?
Well, I think I'll give you two different perspectives to show I'm not completely biased. I think the NAR lawsuit, in my opinion, didn't really fix much.
And can you explain for folks who may not know, just in plain terms, what that lawsuit is about?
Yeah, so originally the lawsuit basically claimed that agents were forcing sellers into commissions and not disclosing that commission was being potentially split between themselves, the seller's agent who represents the seller, and a buyer's agent. Sellers claimed and won the lawsuit, so obviously, the court found that it to be true, weren't being told who their money was being paid to and how it was being distributed. And sellers were like, why am I paying for a buyer's agent who does not represent me? And I think there's some fairness to that. I think there's some legitimacy, but at the same time in this landscape where it has become much harder for people to obtain owning a home, to now potentially take that cost and put it right onto the buyer who, again, we're seeing historical times where it's really difficult for younger generation to get into the buying market at all. It's a big bill to foot for them. In addition, because most of those fees, buyer agent fees, can't be baked into your mortgage as of yet. So it's an upfront cost. Could be 10, 20, 30, could be $50,000, $100,000. The changes that were made were that one, like all these things have to be spelled out specifically in these contracts. They're not guaranteed that the seller is going to pay the fees. Also, our commissions were taken off all the MLS. So if I want to know what I, as a buyer's agent, am going to get paid, I literally have to call or email that agent and find out, hey, is your seller paying me or not? It's not assumed. Now, did that fix the problem? I don't know. The big change for us as buyer's agents, because that commission is not guaranteed to us anymore, we are expected to get a signed contract with you, the buyer, before meeting that says you are going to pay me X amount of dollars. Now, and we discussed this a little bit, I don't do that with all my buyers depending on how we meet, because when we first just met, it was over a phone call, right. A random meet.
Yeah, Zillow Match.com equivalent.
Zillow Match.com. How am I going to get you to sign an agreement with me and we've never met? It discloses what my fees are, so it does set ground rules and informs you of something very important. But for you, it's in some ways locking you into me, and it's just an uncomfortable thing that I don't think solved a problem. It was just what needed to be done because of the other side of things, that now the sell side didn't have to pay my fee. Mm-hmm. So that was the major change. For me, I think that those fees should be disclosed, but I don't know that it has to be a contract. We have other disclosures that are just, hey, I'm disclosing this is what we'll pay. And then the bigger issue, which I don't think was solved at all, buyers have sued to say that buyers' agents are steering them to certain properties based on the commission difference. So one property has a 5% commission, another property has a 1% commission. I have a huge incentive for you to buy the one with a 5%.
Right.
I think that's a legitimate issue. Easy solution, if anyone's listening out there, just post the commissions to everyone, right on Zillow. This is what your buyer's agent is going to get. So if all of a sudden you're looking for properties, Jonathan, and I send you 10 and you ask my feedback on them, and I keep telling you that the best properties are the one with the 4 and 5% commissions to me, then you have to do your own work to find out, are you working with the right agent to trust. But if you don't know all those fees, how can you determine if I'm working for a higher commission or if I'm working for you? And obviously legally, we can't legally steer you towards those higher commissions, but have agents done it? There's a reason why some of the biggest developers in this city offer 5% commissions to the buyer's agent. It's not because they like giving away that money. It's because they know agents are going to push people to those properties.
And that still isn't covered in the regulations right now.
That still is not covered in the regulations. Now we have the Fair Act in New York City going on, which I said I'll give you the other side of the coin, which is actually pretty funny because it kind of contradicts some of the stuff in the NAR lawsuit. So if you're a renter, you no longer have to pay the seller's or the listing agent's broker. So what used to happen is whether you go by yourself or with a buyer or with the renter's agent, you go to that property and you pay a fee to the person that's listing it. And that person doesn't work for you. That person works for the landlord. And they're saying you can't do that anymore. We're not allowing this to happen anymore because that person doesn't work for you. And it's totally fair, but it's had a ripple effect so far in pricing. Now that the landlords have to pay their own agent, their bottom line goes down, and therefore they got to raise prices. And if you've ever rented in New York City, 15%, which is almost 2 months rent, it was like the standard fee. Absurd amount of money. 13 years in this business, I've charged that less than 10 times. That's it. Less than 10 times out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rentals. What I think they should have done to solve this whole thing, make it much simpler, cleaner, is just cap the fee. Make it a 1 month fee cap. Doesn't matter if you go directly to the landlord. Doesn't matter if there's 2 agents involved. If there's 2 agents involved, the landlord's agent gets half a month and your agent gets half a month. That's it. You know, it doesn't cause this issue of raising rents. Us, the brokers, just have to take a little bit of a pay cut, which I think is fair. 15% I always think was absurd.
I mean, some of the messages I'm getting is that the customer, let's say they're the buyer or the person who's leasing the apartment, seems to be getting a short end of the stick here in a couple of these cases. And I mean, what if we could waive outside of these 2 issues, the commissions and, you know, kind of the landlords jacking up the fees to offset this? How can we improve the ecosystem in New York real estate? What are you optimistic about, or what signs of hope do you see this year?
Well, I don't know about this year or not, but people don't tell you this. But when there was a 15% standard, I go to a listing, there's a landlord agent, and then there's me. 15% fee. That gets split between the 2 of us. So when I call a landlord's agent to show a property, they know that if I do that deal with them, they got to split that 15%. Whereas if a renter comes by themselves, they get to take that full 15% themselves. So people are almost at a disadvantage when it came to availability and competitiveness when they were using a broker on their side of the transaction. Now, that doesn't exist because they're not getting money from you. You will have to pay your own agent. You work out what that fee is, if it's a month or a half a month. But now you get the expertise. You get all the knowledge, all the stuff that we did on the sales side without risking being overlooked because that other agent has to split that fee. And in many competitive markets, the Tribecas, the Sohos, the West Villages, if you had your own agent, if they found you off something off market, great. If it wasn't off market, you were at a disadvantage. Someone goes direct, that other agent knows they can get double the fee. And that shouldn't exist anymore, which is a very good thing.
Wow. That's great. And I think so much of this industry is almost about reading what the incentives are. You mentioned competitiveness a lot with the markets and from the lender and buyer side. Let's talk a little bit about the broader industry of realtors themselves. Obviously, there's a lot of social media presence and reality shows, TikTok realtors. How do you navigate the changing landscape and how do you stay competitive with your team?
Honestly, to be totally fair, I don't know if I do. I think we're just now realizing that our little grassroots campaign of meeting people and being honest and being helpful isn't enough. I look at people in this industry, people in my office, people at other offices, And I see them doing deals. I see them doing more deals and bigger deals than me. I know that I know more than them, and I will, treat my customers and clients in a way that they can't compete with. And yet, everything is online today. If you have that presence and you have that, you're able to put out that aura. People attract to that, and that's what brings business. If you scroll on TikTok or Instagram and all these people doing these videos, so many of these people are just taking apartment videos of apartments that they're not showing for clients. They just went in there, they took a video, and people think that have all these clients or they have all these listings. They have nothing. They're just taking videos. And so for a long, long time, I took a lot of pride in our real apartments for real clients. And frankly, we've now started to go away from it because you need to keep up with the Joneses and just people want to see bigger and better things and whatever attracts people to you. I will never completely abandon what I believe in, but you do have to change and you do have to lend yourself to what works and what's getting the attention. You need to adapt or die. That's how it goes.
Well, and I think you have a lot of insights that could be packaged in a certain way. The examples I'm thinking of are like the way you would look at a closet door handle or things that are very small nuances that you've built over your career and have stuck with me as some really hard-earned piece of advice that's a gem that wouldn't be seen just doing a random walkthrough of someone's apartment that you're not even listing. So, I mean, to that point, what are a couple nuggets of wisdom you would recommend that you wouldn't see in one of those TikTok reels?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. When you're going into an apartment, and you touched upon it earlier, ignore the furniture, ignore what's in there. You got to look at the bones of it, and is this what's right for you? And some people do a great job of this. They say, you walk into this beautiful apartment, all windows say, Ben, where am I going to mount the TV? Like there's windows everywhere, there's no walls. And of course, you get yourself an interior designer if you're at that level and you figure it out. But brokers do an amazing job of taking something that is really plain and making it seem nicer. And you have to blank all that out. If you're going to a new development, and of course the seller's agent that works for the sponsor is going to tell you everything's perfect, everything's got a warranty, everything is wonderful. Well, is anyone living here yet? No. So how do you know if they're wonderful? No one's tested it out yet. You see these multi-million-dollar projects, there's leaks, the elevators don't work. And that's not a reason not to buy new development, but you just have to factor that in because you are paying a premium for new, and you have to realize with that new also comes some other potential issues. I always tell people, if you're buying new, you don't want to be the first one in the building. Hopefully people have been living there for 6-12 months already. Hopefully there's still some new apartments in the building to buy, and you let those other people be your guinea pig. See what happens. See if anything's hit the news or the headlines before you moved in there. You had 161 Maiden, which was the headline for first or second season of $1 Million Listing. It was a big part of their show, and no one ever moved in the building. Disaster, sitting there still empty. Now, that's not the fault of any real estate agent. If you could have a new building so bad that you can't even have people move in, you can have anything below that. Leaks, issues, elevators, all that stuff. So yeah, just because it's clean and new doesn't necessarily make it better. And I love new, but just has to be factored in, and you can't be surprised after the fact if there's some tweaks that need to be made.
Yeah, definitely. That was an eye-opening experience for me, seeing new things that, like, for example, we went to a place that had a fridge that would have been in a college dorm room. And it was new, but it was tiny and not practical. And you have to kind of let those guinea pigs say, we got to get some serious actual fridges in here, please.
Yeah, and I think I said to you, it's something like that. And for fridge is fine. You would have lived with that fridge, but I think we discussed it. If that's the fridge that you chose for your brand new development, where else did you cut corners? Maybe they didn't. Maybe our thought on that was wrong. You at least have to flag it and say, this is part of my consideration.
That's right. Little touches that you would think there's a contractor who was specifically chose the subpar quality items for little things that when you see the level of care, and you could hear it when people are giving tours and saying, I don't know that might be a yoga room. I don't know what I was thinking. Like, there's just kind of like, you can tell what's slapdash and what is high quality.
You want it to be a yoga room.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, whatever you want it to be. That's a little scary. On the other side of the coin, do you have any, seems like a bad thing, but actually is just tough to stomach at first? Anything that may not be as bad as I or other prospective buyers might think they are initially?
That's a good question. I would say the co-op thing. Which is very broad, but a lot of people get scared away of co-ops. It's not for everyone, and it takes a certain type of buyer, a very financially sound buyer. I don't think it's a bad thing. If you want to rent out your apartment infinitely, of course, it doesn't work, and we go through what can and cannot work. But people write off co-ops right away. There's value there. And, everything's a little bit more of a process, but what's not a process with a home? You talk about a co-op application. You did the one for a condo. Was it just a breeze? Was it nothing? Was it like filling out a one-pager?
No, I was signing my life away. I've never been more extensive in my life.
Even the condo thing, it's not that much different. It's really just at the end of that, which you didn't have to do with the condo. After that, then the board actually truly looks at it, reviews it, and then interviews you. But yeah, well, co-ops, give them a green light if it's the right situation for you.
Yeah, I was one of those people that just unchecked that co-op button in Street Easy because my parents had a terrible situation in the 80s or something. And so, yeah, I think I was surprised at how lengthy the condo process would be. And I was like, how much more would it be to get a co-op? And you're right, there was a lot of value that I left on the table by not even considering.
It's an extra 15, 30 days and an interview. That, for the most part, that's what it comes down. Can you get a super easy condo that is a one-pager almost? Sure, but that's the exception. It's not the rule. The condo co-op board applications are oftentimes, and I'm seeing it more and more now than we used to, very similar. Very similar.
Yeah. New York is a different beast than so many other markets. What's your kind of boots on the ground take on the New York market?
Greenpoint has been going crazy. The developments in Greenpoint have sold extremely quickly, and where 3, 4, 5 years ago, maybe further back than that, it was Williamsburg. Everyone wanted to be in Williamsburg, prime part of Williamsburg, right by the water. And now I'm getting more and more people, not only they're saying, I'll look in Williamsburg, but I'll also look in Greenpoint. Now, a lot of people are Greenpoint number 1 and Williamsburg number 2. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's a little bit of value that still exists in Greenpoint compared to Williamsburg, but those prices are evening out. But Brooklyn in general has just been, anything around Prospect Park as well, has really been very strong. So yeah, I think those areas are really hot.
Let's say you're an out-of-town buyer or a person who's coming into the New York market. How do you recommend they prepare for the beast that is New York City real estate?
Well, first is get yourself a good real estate agent to help guide you, but you need a good team. You need an attorney that can advise you. You need to know the process. People get super scared about making an offer, and people want to do things out of order, which, sometimes we can accommodate those things, but in New York City, you do your due diligence on a property after you make that offer. Nothing's in contract prior to doing your due diligence. And it's really just doing things in the correct order and process. But yeah, having a great team. You need the right inspectors if an inspection is necessary. You need attorney is so important. And the things about an attorney that you need to find is, one, experience. That goes without saying. They have to know what they're doing. But you need to find an attorney who is willing to work for you. Their fees are not that much. You're talking about $25,000 to $5,000 typically. So you have to find the people that are going to put in the work that you deserve to have done for you for a fee that is not a wildly exorbitant fee. So who's going to go above and beyond for you and answer all your questions and be patient? And then also, in my opinion, one of the biggest things is someone who can keep their ego, or someone who doesn't have an ego. I have seen more deal dies on attorney emails. Nothing to do with the benefit of the buyer or seller. Just people dragging things out and just wanting to be right. And the argument snowballs. And then one thing I will say, most buyers and sellers, once they engage with an attorney, more so than a real estate agent, they trust them. Like, they really trust them. Two real estate attorneys start butting heads, and your attorney starts advising you, hey, this doesn't look good. Next thing you know, the deal's off, and you're not even sure why it fell through. And the reality is, it just sparked from nothing, two people arguing, and it didn't have anything to do with your well-being.
Oh man, I did not understand that until going through that process. Shout out to Scott Skolnick and his team that you recommended me, the law firm that not only gave me, a great deal, and it was very reasonable from their fees, but ultimately saved me almost six figures in the overall process. So huge shout out to them and to good lawyers. You really don't know you need it until you really need them.
A lot of good ones out there, but yours just such a great example. You scoured through everything. And the attorney, not once, I don't think, bit back or oh my God, let me do my job. None of that. All of your stuff is valid and interesting and great. The most thorough buyer I've ever seen.
Well, you know why that happened, Ben? That was GPT. Everything was so overwhelming as a new buyer. I thought, I don't know what any of this jargon means. And so I felt much more empowered to run it through a first pass. Obviously, having gentle, empathetic teaching kind of partners like you, like Scott the lawyer, they weren't clapping back or saying, what the hell, let me do my job, because I treated this entire process as a learning experience. And it was a much easier time going through the emotional roller coaster of a lot of money being thrown around in different directions. I would say you can't do it one or the other. I couldn't just buy a house using ChatGPT, but it could definitely help me synthesize and pre-process a lot of this paperwork, get through condo board applications, and ask the right questions so that then the lawyer could come back or you could come back and give me the wisdom of experience to kind of thread the needle between those two sides.
But I love that so much, and I want to shout your praises as a buyer, because you're someone who came in willing to put in your own work, willing to do your own digging, and yet you came back at the end of that experience and saying, Ben, you were invaluable. I needed you.
Oh, I thank you for saying that. I'm excited to share your team and your style with the world because it is a very intimate relationship. I mean, we had a lot of conversations where it was basically, I asked you, what would you do in my situation, Ben? And there were, potential offers where we didn't have enough to compete against an all cash offer.
Mortgage contingency is they want.
Mortgage contingency, which, was something that I didn't know what it meant. I've forgotten already in the process what that means again. But I mean, it was something that I needed to gauge with you. And you always kind of gave me a very straight answer. And you reiterated this: I do my work so that I can sleep well at night and I can go home to my kid and my family and feel like I did my best to try to support my clients and not try to win them over for that $20,000. And there are so many curveballs that you are thrown at a daily basis. So I think, my advice to someone new is just trust the process and try to let go. A lot of this journey is out of your hands. It's in lawyers' hands, or you're just waiting, or maybe there's an open house that gives you a little tension, or there's so many elements that if you come in gripping so tightly that you need this house and these deals, you're going to have a pretty rude awakening. And I think for adults, this may be one of the most potentially traumatic interactions you may have in that way.
But the TV broker, they show this beautiful property, and then, 30 minutes later in an episode, you see at the bottom of the screen, oh, this agent just closed a $100,000 commission, and it happened just like that. And people are like, wait a second. He shook two hands and he went like this at an apartment, and a contract got signed, and someone's writing him a check for $100,000, and then I get people coming to me and they think that that's how it works and that that's the type of money I'm getting paid. And when I watch those shows, it really it frustrates the heck out of me, because I'm like, man, if they only knew what actually happens in these situations and these deals. It is not easy to get to the finish line, as the perception is that these transactions happen like that. President of the National Association of Realtors made the announcement just the other day saying that they think the DOJ thinks that we get paid too much.
Wow.
At the top end of things, maybe that's accurate, but tell me one industry where the people at the top end of things don't get paid too much.
Right, right. Wow. Well, I think seeing how so many deals don't get to the finish line, my impression of your team and your style is that the journey should be as frictionless, as painless as possible, because this industry throws so many punches. You have so many emotional ups and downs. Might as well have a good time and try to enjoy the process as much as you can and make people feel good, because there's a lot of stress. And that's all I felt emanating from your presence. That's why I would, use you first, and you're the first person to call whenever anybody I know wants to go start that race.
Not every journey can be as beautiful as you'd like, but we try. At the end of the day, if you don't open yourself up to working with someone and enjoying the journey together, it's gonna be ugly. It's gonna be really, really miserable, and nobody wants that on the biggest transaction, the biggest decision of your life, and especially if it doesn't work out, you want to not be miserable through that whole process.
Well, Ben, it's been a great conversation. That's beautiful. Ben, how can anyone listening find you and your team and work with you?
You can find us on Instagram or TikTok, the Strat Team, at kw.com. You can always email us or find us on the Keller Williams website.
Thanks so much for your time, Ben. Really appreciate it, and talk to you soon. Have a great tour.
All right, man. Take care. Great
Bye-bye.
seeing you.
Thanks.